April 19th, 1945. The Harz Mountains, central Germany. The air is heavy with the smell of damp earth, wet pine, and the faint metallic tang of cordite. It clings to the wool of Sergeant Frank Miller's uniform, a ghost of the firefight that ended an hour ago. Water drips from the enormous firs that form a dense canopy overhead, each drop sounding like a ticking clock in the unnatural quiet. For the men of Able Company, 9th Infantry Division, this quiet is more unnerving than the chatter on MG-42. It's the sound of a vacuum, of an enemy that has either fled, died, or is waiting just beyond the next ridge. Miller shifts the weight of his M1 Garand in his hands, the worn stock smooth and familiar. He scans the gloomy forest, his eyes tracing the shadows between the thick, moss-covered tree trunks. He's been doing this for 3 years, across North Africa, Sicily, France, and now here, in the very heart of the collapsing Reich. He is tired, the kind of tired that settles deep in the bones, a weariness not just of body, but of soul. Beside him, Private First Class Stan Goldstein, a skinny kid from Brooklyn who learned German from his grandparents, shivers slightly, though the day is not particularly cold. It's the forest itself that seems to radiate a chill, a place of old myths and new nightmares. Lieutenant Davis, young but steady, raises a hand, signaling a halt. The squad freezes, melting into the undergrowth. Every man is an island of coiled tension. Up ahead, through the dense woods, there are voices, German voices. They are sharp, angry, slicing through the stillness. It's not the sound of combat. There are no orders being barked for an attack, no cries for a medic. This is something else, something personal. Miller exchanges a look with Davis. The lieutenant nods, his jaw set. He gestures for Miller and Goldstein to move up with him. The 3 men creep forward, their boots making soft, sucking sounds in the mud. They move like predators, placing each foot with deliberate care, their weapons held at the low ready. The voices grow louder, clearer. One is a man's, high-pitched with fury. The other is a woman, strained with fear and desperation. They reach the edge of a small natural clearing, a bowl of muddy grass surrounded by ancient pines. What they see makes them pause, a bizarre tableau that doesn't fit any training manual. In the center of the clearing stand 3 figures in German uniforms. One is a lieutenant, an officer, Reed then with a pale, fanatical face. His uniform is surprisingly clean, as if he just stepped out of a command bunker. He is shouting, his words a torrent of guttural commands. The second is an older Feldwebel, a sergeant. His face is a roadmap of exhaustion, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his gear and perhaps the entire war. He holds a Kar 98K rifle, but lets it hang loosely in his grasp. The third figure is the source of the desperate pleas. A young woman, no older than 20, wearing the feld-gray uniform of a Wehrmachtfallberin, a female auxiliary. Her insignia, a small stylized lightning bolt, marks her as a communications operator. She is unarmed. Her blonde hair is matted with dirt and rain, and her face is streaked with tears. She backs away as the lieutenant advances on her, her hands held up in a gesture of supplication. She is pleading, her voice cracking. Miller doesn't need Goldstein's translation to understand the universal language of terror. The lieutenant seems oblivious to their presence. His world has shrunk to this small patch of mud and the perceived betrayal standing before him. He screams something about duty, honor, and the Fuhrer. The words are poison darts. The woman shakes her head, sobbing. The Feldwebel just watches, his expression unreadable, a statue of weary resignation. This is not an interrogation. It feels like a ritual, a grim private ceremony of discipline and death. The air grows thick, heavy with an awful premonition. Miller feels the cold dread creep up his spine. This is wrong, all of it. Without warning, the lieutenant grabs the woman by the arm and shoves her violently towards a massive oak tree at the edge of the clearing. Her small frame hits the rough bark with a sickening thud. She slides to the ground, a crumpled heap of gray wool and fear. The lieutenant turns to the Feldwebel and barks a sharp order. The older sergeant hesitates for just a fraction of a second, a flicker of dissent in his tired eyes, before he grimly raises his rifle. The lieutenant, not satisfied, pulls a Walther P38 from his holster. The metallic click as he thumbs back the hammer echoes across the clearing. The intent is now brutally, undeniably clear. They are going to execute her, right here, right now.
The forest holds its breath. Sergeant Miller feels his own heart hammer against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, profound silence. The German lieutenant stands rigid, his Walther P38 extended, a black exclamation point against the gray sky. The Feldwebel has his Kar 98K shouldered, but his aim is uncertain, his movement stiff and reluctant. Between them, slumped against the ancient oak, the young woman is a study in abject terror. She has stopped sobbing. Her eyes are wide, fixed on the muzzles of the guns that are about to end her life. This is the moment the world shrinks to the size of a firing pin. For the Americans hidden at the edge of the clearing, time seems to warp, stretching into an agonizing eternity. Lieutenant Davis's face is a mask of disbelief and indecision. What is the protocol for this? There is none. This isn't in the field manual. Do they intervene in what appears to be an internal German disciplinary action, or do they stand by and witness a cold-blooded killing? To open fire would be to start a firefight they might not win against an enemy whose numbers they don't know. To do nothing feels like a profound moral failure, a stain on the very reason they believe they are fighting this war. Miller glances at the men around him. Their faces mirror his own shock. Young Private Bishop looks like he's about to be sick. PFC Goldstein, the translator, is muttering under his breath, a stream of Yiddish and English curses. They are soldiers, trained to kill the enemy, but the scene unfolding before them has nothing to do with combat. It is murder, plain and simple. The lines are blurred. The enemy is about to execute the enemy, and they are the only witnesses. The German lieutenant barks under their command, his voice shrill. He is ordering the Feldwebel to fire. The older soldier flinches, his knuckles white on the stock of his rifle. He does not pull the trigger. The lieutenant takes a step toward him, his face contorted with rage, raising his own pistol to the woman's head. He is going to do it himself. And then a sound cuts through the tension. A plea, not in German, but in broken, desperate English. The woman, looking past the guns, seems to see the flicker of movement in the trees, a glint of a helmet, a different shade of green. Her eyes find theirs. "Please," she cries out, her voice a raw, shredded whisper that carries with impossible clarity across the clearing. "Help me, please. I'm not ready to die." The words strike the American soldiers like a physical blow. It's no longer an abstract situation. It's not about uniforms or nationalities or ideologies. It's a human being begging for her life. That simple, powerful plea erases all doubt, all hesitation. It is a direct appeal to the humanity that lies beneath the hardened exterior of every soldier in that forest. Sergeant Miller finds his sights are already centered on the German lieutenant's chest. His finger rests on the trigger of his M1 Garand. He doesn't wait for an order. He knows what must be done. But Lieutenant Davis is faster. He makes his decision. He rises from his crouched position, stepping out from behind the cover of a massive pine tree, his Thompson submachine gun held firmly at his hip. He is exposed, a clear target, but his voice is solid rock. "Halt!" he bellows, the American word cutting through the German-filled air like a whip crack. "Drop your weapons, now. Hände hoch." The effect is instantaneous. The two German soldiers spin around, their expressions a mixture of shock, confusion, and fear. The lieutenant's fanatical certainty vanishes, replaced by the startled realization that his private world of absolute authority has been invaded. The Feldwebel looks almost relieved, as if a great weight has been lifted from him. For a heart-stopping second, nobody moves. The clearing is now a triangle of death. The lieutenant's Walther is still pointed vaguely at the woman, but his eyes are locked on Davis. The Feldwebel's rifle is caught somewhere between the woman and the new American threat, and a dozen M1s and bars are now trained on the two of them from the shadows of the surrounding forest. The dripping of the water from the trees is the only sound. The powder keg is set. A single wrong move, a single nervous twitch, and this quiet clearing will erupt in a storm of hot lead.
The standoff hangs in the air, fragile and electric. Every soldier, American and German, is a statue carved from adrenaline. Lieutenant Davis stands his ground in the center of the clearing, his Thompson a silent promise of overwhelming force. Sergeant Miller keeps his sights locked on the German lieutenant, watching the man's eyes, the slight tremor in his pistol hand. This is the moment of truth, the second that will decide if everyone lives or dies. The lieutenant, a man named Richter, as they would later learn, finds his voice first. He doesn't lower his weapon. Instead, he starts shouting in rapid, furious German. He is indignant, outraged. He gestures with his pistol from the woman to the Americans and back again, as if explaining a perfectly reasonable procedure that has been rudely interrupted. PFC Goldstein, crouched near Davis, provides a hushed running translation. He's saying she's a deserter, a traitor to the fatherland. He says it's an internal Wehrmacht matter. He's telling us to bug out. He says we have no jurisdiction here. Jurisdiction. The word is so absurd in this muddy, blood-soaked forest that Miller almost laughs. The Reich has no jurisdiction anymore. Its borders are imaginary lines being erased daily by Allied tanks. But in Lieutenant Richter's mind, the Reich is eternal. The rules still apply. The discipline must be maintained, even if it's the last disciplined act on Earth. His fanaticism is a form of madness, a refusal to accept the reality that the world he fought for has ceased to exist. He is a priest of a dead god, still trying to perform the rites. Davis ignores the tirade. He takes a slow, deliberate step forward. "Tell him I don't care what she is," he says to Goldstein, his eyes never leaving Richter. "He has 5 seconds to drop that pistol, or my men will cut him in half." Goldstein relays the message, his German sharp and unequivocal. The lieutenant's face flushes with anger. He spits on the ground. For a terrifying moment, it looks as though he will choose death over the humiliation of surrender. He believes he is right. In his warped view of the world, he is the last bastion of order in a universe descending into chaos. To him, the woman represents the rot, the weakness, the defeatism that has cost Germany the war. Executing her is not a crime. It is a patriotic necessity. But as Richter glares at the ring of American soldiers emerging from the trees, a subtle shift occurs. It's in the eyes of the other German, the old Feldwebel. Throughout the lieutenant's rant, he has remained silent, his rifle held loosely. He looks from his fanatical young officer to the calm, determined faces of the American GIs. He looks at the sobbing young woman cowering by the tree. You can see the war in his face. Not just this war, but perhaps the one before it too. You can see the endless miles marched, the winters endured, the comrades lost. And you can see that he has had enough. He has reached his limit. This one last pointless act of cruelty is a line he will not cross. Slowly, with the deliberate motion of a man shaking off a long and terrible dream, the Feldwebel lowers his Kar 98K. He opens his hands, and the rifle, the symbol of his service and his duty for years, falls with a heavy thud into the soft mud. The sound is as final as a gunshot. It is the sound of surrender, not just of a weapon, but of a cause. Lieutenant Richter stares at his subordinate, his mouth agape. The betrayal in his eyes is absolute. He has been abandoned. His authority, built on the crumbling foundations of the Third Reich, has just dissolved before his eyes. The power in the clearing has shifted completely. He is no longer an officer enforcing military law. He is just a man with a pistol, alone, surrounded by a dozen rifles. His last ally has just cast his vote for sanity.
Lieutenant Richter stands alone in the mud, a ghost at a feast he doesn't understand. The fall of the Feldwebel's rifle was the breaking of a spell. Richter's world, a rigid structure of orders, obedience, and brutal consequence, has fractured into a million pieces. He looks at his subordinate, who refuses to meet his gaze, then at the ring of American infantrymen, whose expressions are unyielding. His fanaticism, which burned so brightly just moments before, now seems like a fragile, hollow thing. There is no bravado left, only the cold, stark reality of his position. The war is over for him. His pistol hand wavers. The Walther P-38, once an instrument of absolute power, now feels impossibly heavy. He could raise it. He could try to take one of them with him in a final, meaningless act of defiance. Sergeant Miller watches the thought flicker across the German's face and tightens his grip on his Garand. But the moment passes. The fire in Richter's eyes dies out, replaced by a flat, empty resignation. With a sigh that seems to drain the last bit of air from his lungs, he unclips the holster from his belt. He doesn't drop it. He places it on the ground with a strange, almost reverent care, as if laying a part of himself to rest. The standoff is over. The TIs move in swiftly, professionally. Two of them cover Richter, while Miller disarms him completely, finding a small knife in his boot. The Feldwebel races his hands without being told, his face a mask of weary relief. He looks older than he did 5 minutes ago. Lieutenant Davis directs his men, his voice calm and controlled, restoring military order to the chaotic scene. The focus then shifts to the woman. She is still huddled at the base of the oak tree, shaking uncontrollably, her body racked with silent, convulsive sobs. The immediate threat is gone, but the terror remains, a poison in her system. PFC Henderson, the squad medic, approaches her slowly, cautiously, as one might approach a frightened animal. He kneels beside her, murmuring soft, reassuring words that she probably doesn't understand. He unscrews his canteen and offers it to her. She flinches at first, then takes it with a trembling hand, drinking greedily. Henderson pulls a Hershey's bar from his pack, a treasure in these final days of the war, and hands it to her. She stares at the brown paper wrapper as if it's an artifact from another planet. This simple act of kindness, this offering of water and chocolate, seems to break through the shock. Her sobs become audible now, a raw, painful sound of release. As she calms, Miller takes a closer look at her. She's just a girl. The gray uniform hangs on her thin frame. The Blitz medal insignia on her sleeve seems like a cruel joke. She was a lightning girl, part of the vast communications network that was the nervous system of the Wehrmacht. Now she is just a terrified survivor who almost paid for the collapse of that system with her life. As they prepare to march the 3 prisoners back to the American lines, Richter, his hands now bound behind his back, stops and glares at Miller. He mutters something in low, venomous German. Miller glances at Goldstein. What'd he say? Goldstein listens to Richter's bitter words, his own face hardening.
He waits a moment before translating, as if reluctant to give the man's hatred a voice in English. He says we're fools, Goldstein says quietly, his voice tight with contempt. He says we have doomed Germany. By showing mercy to the weak, we have proven that we are the weaker race, and we will fail to hold what we have won. The unrepentant, chilling conviction hangs in the damp forest air, a final toxic echo of the ideology that had set the entire world on fire.
The walk back to the battalion command post is a somber procession. The forest, which half an hour ago was a place of imminent death, is now just a collection of trees, silent witnesses to the strange drama that unfolded. The GIs of Able Company form a perimeter around their 3 new prisoners, the tension of the standoff replaced by a quiet, contemplative mood. Each of the Germans is a walking symbol of the Third Reich in its final agony. In the front, hands tied, strides Lieutenant Richter, his back ramrod straight, his face a mask of defiant contempt. He is the unyielding fanatic, the true believer who will march to his doom convinced of his own righteousness. Behind him plods the Feldwebel, his shoulders stooped, his eyes fixed on the muddy ground. He is the weary veteran, the cog in the machine that has finally, mercifully, broken. And trailing them all, flanked by the medic, is Ilse, the young Helferin. She is the human cost, the ordinary person swept up in the grand, catastrophic ambitions of madmen. For Sergeant Frank Miller, the scene is deeply unsettling. His war has been, for the most part, a brutal but simple equation. The enemy is on that hill, in that bunker. The objective is to remove him, by capture or by death. It is a job, a horrific, soul-crushing job, but a job with clear parameters. This was different. This wasn't a battle. It was a moral test, administered in a muddy clearing by a cruel twist of fate. They had intervened not to defeat an enemy, but to save one from another. It was an act that defied the simple logic of war, blurring the lines between friend and foe, justice and revenge. Richter's parting words gnaw at him, not because he believes them, but because they reveal the depth of the sickness they have been fighting. It isn't just an army, it's an idea, and ideas are harder to kill than soldiers. Back at the makeshift command post set up in a captured German farmhouse, the prisoners are processed. They are separated immediately. Richter is taken for interrogation, his venomous ideology noted down by a weary intelligence officer. The Feldwebel gives his name, rank, and serial number and says nothing more. He sits on a crate, staring into space, a man hollowed out by history. Ilse is handled differently. She is taken to a separate room, away from the male prisoners. A female army nurse is brought in to speak with her. Through Goldstein's translation, her story comes out in fragments. Her communications unit, attached to a flak battalion, was shattered by an American armored thrust 2 days ago. The command structure disintegrated. It was every man and woman for themselves. She and a few others were trying to make their way west, hoping to surrender to the Americans rather than the Russians. Richter, commanding a small ad hoc group of stragglers, found them. He declared them all deserters and ordered them shot. The others scattered. He caught her. Later, Miller sees her sitting on a cot in a barn that serves as a temporary holding area. She is wrapped in a coarse, brown U.S. Army blanket, clutching a tin mug of coffee. The terror has finally receded from her eyes, replaced by a profound, bottomless exhaustion. She looks up and sees Miller watching. She offers a small, hesitant nod of acknowledgement, a silent thank you that says more than words ever could. Miller nods back, then turns and walks away. He looks out over the rolling hills of the German heartland. The war is almost over, but the incident in the forest serves as a stark reminder of what happens when a society collapses. It is a descent into madness, where the most fanatical hold the power of life and death over the most vulnerable. Ilse's desperate plea, "Please, I'm not ready to die," was more than just a cry for her own life. It was the unheard scream of a generation fed to the wolves, a final, human protest against the dying rage of a monstrous regime. It was an echo in the forest that the men of Able Company would carry with them long after the guns finally fell silent.